In the last part of the series, part 37, we saw YAHSHUA rebuking the Pharisees. The Pharisees tried to catch YAHSHUA up with questions they thought would place him in opposition against others, but he used it to teach lessons, and then he later rebuked them and pointed out their hypocrisy. We learned so many lessons from YAHSHUA. That's why he is our rabbi, our teacher. We must pitch our tents with him and be amongst him always. He died for our sins so that those would be justified by his blood. We shall be saved from wrath through him. The wrath we are saved from is his day of judgment. Elohim commands all men everywhere to repent, because he has appointed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. He has given assurance of this to all by raising him from the dead. But before we are judged, many things will happen first. He will test the whole earth, and we must be prepared for this. The end times is not the end of the world. It's the period of time that draws us towards the Messiah's 1,000-year reign on earth. You will find this in Revelation chapter 20, and following this comes Judgment Day. But before all of this, many things will take place. I have found that many churches are not preparing the church for this period of time, and because of this, many are not discerning the times and recognizing what is upon them. Many are not ready for the day of Yahweh and the many things that will happen after. For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of Yahweh so comes as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But you are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. You are all sons and daughters of light, and sons and daughters of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep, as others do, but let us watch and be sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk are drunk at night. But let us, who are of the day, be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and as a helmet, the hope of salvation. For Elohim did not appoint us to wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Adon, YAHSHUA HaMashiach, who died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. Therefore, comfort each other and edify one another. The end times should not be something that scares you. You are drawing nearer to your redemption. And yes, it may be very troubling times for many of us. But YAHSHUA said, do not fear those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. But rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. And for you watching this, you do fear him, which is why you are giving him the time right now. So you should not have fear of the end times. You should have faith. If you find yourself with a lack of faith and fear of these times, just use it as a wake-up call that you must strengthen your faith in him today. YAHSHUA spoke about these things so that we are able to recognize the times, so that the day does not come upon us like a thief. A thief comes around when it is unexpected. You never expect a thief to come. That's why we are told what the times will look like. We just need to know his words and pay attention to the times we live in so that his day does not come upon us unexpectedly. Now before we begin, let's get something understood. I am not an expert on the future. I may have an understanding of the end times that may be different than what actually happens in the future. I've learned a long time ago from past mistakes to not place dates or talk in exacts, because there is always a strong possibility for error. The apostles walked amongst YAHSHUA with him, teaching them directly about what would happen to him, that he would be crucified and resurrect on the third day. But even with all that teaching, they still did not understand what was going to happen until it actually did. So it's quite possible that my or your understanding of future events could not be accurate. So please, this topic is not something that needs to start a debate or argument. If you have a revelation or understanding that seems to be deeper or a different way of understanding, just state it in the comments and allow the Ruach HaKodesh to minister to us individually whether we take it or not. I ask you to do the same with me. I do not claim to be a know-it-all or a prophet. I'm just speaking based on what I feel led to say. The goal of this video is not to tell you what will happen exactly in the future. The goal of this video is to bring the words of YAHSHUA to life so that we are all expectant of him and are always ready for him. We do not need to know exactly how things will unfold to know we must be ready for him. But if you understand that his day is approaching, it should create a sense of urgency in you that the most important thing is not your career or racial equality or creating a better home for your family. The most important thing is being ready for him, so that his day does not come upon you like a thief. So let's discuss what YAHSHUA has to tell us about the last days. I hope this blesses you. Let's begin. So YAHSHUA was still in Jerusalem. As he went out and departed from the temple, his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And YAHSHUA said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." Okay, so let's just pause right there. I just want to make sure that this is understood. YAHSHUA was giving prophecy. YAHSHUA was speaking about the temple being destroyed. This prophecy was fulfilled in 70 AD when Rome destroyed the temple. Now the controversy is that the Wailing Wall that is still up today either contradicts YAHSHUA or the Wailing Wall is not actually where the temple was. These are debates that I do not entertain, and I encourage you not to entertain them as well. The reason is because it doesn't matter. Understand, the Wailing Wall is not the temple or its building. It is the wall of the perimeter of the building. It is not the temple itself. The fact is, the temple and the buildings of the temple inside the walls were all destroyed by Rome. This prophecy was fulfilled shortly after YAHSHUA left. This is all that needs to be understood here. Don't get so deep that you bring yourself confusion and doubt. Now, as YAHSHUA sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And YAHSHUA answered and said to them, "Take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Messiah,' and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are beginning of sorrows. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world, as witness to all the nations. And then the end will come. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house. And let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant, and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time. No, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh will be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Messiah,' or 'There,' do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, 'Look, he is in the desert,' do not go out. Or 'Look, he is in the inner room,' do not believe it." Okay, so let's go over this. The disciples apparently had questions after YAHSHUA told them that the temple will be destroyed again. They came to him and asked him, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming, and of the end of the age?" They still did not understand what was coming. If you remember, not too long ago, they were preparing for YAHSHUA to go to Jerusalem and set up his kingdom. We spoke about it in part 35 of the series, when the mother of James and John asked YAHSHUA for her sons to sit at both the right hand and left hand of his throne. So the disciples still did not understand what was happening, especially since now YAHSHUA just told them that the temple would be torn down. They wanted to know when this was all happening. The King James says the end of the world, but this is not the best translation, because they were not expecting the end of the world. They were expecting the time when he claimed his kingdom, which would bring an end to the current age that they were, and we are, currently in. Now the first thing YAHSHUA tells them is to not be deceived. Take heed that no one deceives you. And this is something that as believers, we all must have in our awareness. The unfortunate thing is that much of the church-going public today does not walk in an awareness of not being deceived. We are so trusting of many that are actually deceiving us. This was YAHSHUA's first instruction, and we ignore it. Many only look at Jim Jones types or not being deceived by Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons as the most prevalent deception they need to be aware of. But in his explanation, there are many things that we should not be deceived by. He told the disciples this because he wanted them to understand that the destruction of the temple did not mean the nearness of the end of the age and his coming kingdom. He breaks down the times into 3 parts. The first part we see in verse 6, in which he says, "The end is not yet," which means that just because these things are happening doesn't mean his kingdom has come. The second thing is, all these things are the beginning of sorrows, found in verse 8. Sorrows means birth pangs. Birth pangs are labor pains. YAHSHUA is so wonderful because when you really understand what he is trying to say, things become much more clear. When a woman goes in labor, her labor pains start off few in between with less intensity. But as the baby starts getting closer to being delivered, the labor pains increase in intensity. As the Messiah's kingdom gets closer to coming to pass, the sorrows or labor pains will increase in intensity and frequency until YAHSHUA returns in his glory. The last part of the times is found in verse 14, which is, "Then the end will come." In the first part, he tells us that we will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Many like to use this to explain the current times we are in, but that is not necessarily true. Over time, since the destruction of Jerusalem, there has been wars and rumors of wars. This is something that he is just telling us will happen. He told us to see that we are not troubled because the wars have come to pass, because the end is not yet. The next part, which he explains the labor pains of his coming kingdom, include nation rising against nation, kingdom rising against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. Again, because so many of these things are happening right now, people believe that we are in the end times. But what's important to understand is that it's not that these things are happening right now that makes it the end times. It's the frequency and the intensity. These things haven't been happening from a long time ago in history. There was one reason why people reject that we are in the end times today. Because many people thought that when these wars and nations and kingdoms rising against each other happened back in the past, it also meant that it was the end of the age. But they were wrong. So they think that it's probably the same with us today, that we're just overthinking. That's why it's important to understand what he's saying. It's not that these events are happening, but the frequency and intensity that these things are happening. It's about the labor pains. If a woman is in labor, she will have contractions, but the doctor won't tell her it's delivery time until those birth pains and contractions are more frequent and are more intense. So this is the reason why we understand that we are in the end times, because of the intensity of the labor pains. Again, understand what is being delivered is the kingdom of Elohim, the Messiah's 1,000-year reign on earth. The end will not come until the gospel is preached in all the world and witnessed to all nations. We see this happening more clearly now because of the internet. This ministry, along with many others, are having a real reach around the world. The good news is being delivered and will continue to be delivered until the end has come, and the devil cannot stop it. So don't give Satan too much credit and allow him to block your ministry. If the Father has a word for you to deliver to the world, it has to be given, and the devil cannot stop it. Now this is what I want you to focus on. Listen to what he says the world will be like before the end comes. People will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you. You will be hated by all nations for his namesake. Many will be offended. Many will betray one another and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. These are definite reasons and belief of the end times today. We will be hated because we love YAHSHUA and his truth. Our beliefs today are now considered hate speech. It's ridiculous and crazy. Many will be offended. This is not just unbelievers, but it's really shown through actual believers. Unbelievers are not offended because they think we're crazy. But it's believers that have been lied to through their religious traditions and false teachers and doctrine that become offended when you try to bring correctness. Me personally, I've been accused of hate within people I love for just speaking a level of strictness to his word. Not even on hard topics like law versus grace, but on topics like the rejection of pagan holidays like Christmas and Easter. Churchgoers become offended when you bring this up, and they will not even try to understand what you're trying to tell them. Like YAHSHUA said, they become offended and betray and hate us. I'm sure many of you have gone through the same things. While it hurts, this is why we depend and lean on His word, because He told us these things would happen. We are just witnessing His prophetic word and seeing the intensity and frequency of how this is happening. It just showed us how far along in the labor pains we are in. He says that lawlessness will abound and the love of many will grow cold. How can one argue that this is not the day and age that we are in?
I don't have any advice for homosexuals except to put a bullet in your own head so that you don't molest my kids or anyone else's kids.
It was not nearly this bad 20 years ago. Don't get me wrong, people were bad. But today, Satan's doctrine of do as thou wilt is in full effect today, and people are so cold-hearted. Again, you see this extremely evident when you speak with those under churchianity that speak on their love of the Messiah, but do not know how to transmit that love to others. And they take biblical correctness as hate instead of love. When someone is trying to inform you of your wrongs, they are not doing this out of hate, but out of love. If they hated you and did not care, they would just allow you to keep doing wrong and to die in your sin. Someone who brings the word to you is loving you, not hating you. This does not mean that you must blindly just listen to everybody. But if someone comes to you about scripture, if it's possible, have the conversation. Take the scriptures and pray about it. Never have a hardness of heart that you think you know what they're trying to tell you and you know everything and you can just reject them. Someone close to me rejects every word I say to them and never takes it to prayer and study, all because they believe that if they are doing something wrong, the Father would have showed them. The point I'm always trying to make is, why do you think that the Father is not trying to speak to you through me? For many of us that go through this same thing, an answer to this question is oftentimes because we lack patience and can come off hostile and angry. I was guilty of this for years in my early walk because I was on such fire and no one would listen, and that brought about anger. But we all must understand we cannot preach His word and teach it through anger and lack of patience. We lose many opportunities and we are not displaying what we are preaching. Yes, there will be people that reject you regardless if you come right or not. But let that be on them, not you. Not because you are not walking in the Spirit and showing the fruits of the Spirit. If this is something that you struggle with, take a step back and just build yourself up more. And when the time is right, He will show you. Now, as he was talking, He then tells us, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, that we should flee. The abomination of desolation comes from the book of Daniel, specifically in Daniel chapter 9 verse 27, Daniel 11 verse 31, and Daniel 12 verse 11. This is the Antichrist. He will confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, which is 7 years. There will be more of a teaching on Daniel's 70 weeks later, as it requires a whole teaching on its own. But the Antichrist will stand in the holy place, which is one reason why there is a belief in the third temple being erected, which is what the Khazarian Jews are seeking to happen in Jerusalem as we speak. But the abomination of desolation is said to do many things. It is said that Daniel chapter 11 verse 31, when speaking of the abomination of desolation, is referencing Antiochus IV. He desecrated the temple and set up an idol to Zeus in it. This action of Antiochus was just a prelude to what the Antichrist, the ultimate man of sin, will come and do. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 2 and 4, Paul also speaks of the Antichrist in the end times, proclaiming himself to be God in the temple of Elohim. YAHSHUA tells us when this happens, we need to flee. YAHSHUA says, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. This means that Elohim will place a limit on the tribulation. The church will not have to endure persecution forever. The Messiah will intervene and prevent complete genocide of the church. Remember, Revelation chapter 6 verse 11, then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren, who would be killed as they were, was completed. But he ended this part how he started it, telling us not to be deceived, not to believe others who show great signs and wonders, because there will be many false Christs and false prophets that will arise and, if possible, deceive the elect as well. So make sure you are not deceived by the wicked ones. Signs and wonders must be tested against correct doctrine and by witness of the Ruach HaKodesh. But this is only the first half of his explanation of the end of the age. I'm very passionate about this, and I want to cover as much as I can, so in sake of time, we will stop here and pick up next week where we just left off. But let's review right now what you should know from this part of the series. 1. In Matthew chapter 24 verse 2, YAHSHUA was speaking about the temple being destroyed. This prophecy was fulfilled in 70 AD when Rome destroyed the temple. 2. The first thing YAHSHUA tells the disciples is not to be deceived. Take heed that no one deceives you. And this is something that as believers we all must have in our awareness. 3. YAHSHUA breaks down the end of the age into 3 parts. 1. The end is not yet, verse 4. 2. The beginning of sorrows, verse 8. And 3. Then the end will come, verse 14. 4. Sorrows mean birth pangs or labor pains. As the Messiah's kingdom gets closer to coming to pass, the sorrows or labor pains will increase in intensity and frequency until YAHSHUA returns in his glory. 5. When understanding we are close into the coming of the end of this age, it's important to understand that it's not because the nations and kingdoms are rising against each other and that we are having earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in various places. These things have happened over a long period of history. It's not new. It's not that they are happening, but the frequency and intensity that these things are happening. It's about the labor pains. 6. What is being delivered is the kingdom of Elohim, the Messiah's 1,000-year reign on earth, found in Revelation chapter 20. 7. The good news is being delivered and will continue to be delivered until the end has come, and the devil cannot stop it. So don't give Satan too much credit and allow him to block your ministry. If the Father has a word for you to deliver to the world, it has to be given, and the devil cannot stop it. 8. Before the end comes, people will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you. You will be hated by all nations for his name's sake. Many will be offended. Many will betray one another and will hate one another, and then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. Verses 9 through 12. 9. The many that will be offended will not primarily be of unbelievers, but of believers that have been deceived through false doctrine, false teachers, and religious unbiblical traditions. 10. When you see the Antichrist stand up in the holy place and proclaim himself to be God, flee and prepare for persecution. 11. Do not be deceived by false prophets and false teachers. I will end this just as I started this. This is not a time of fear, but a time of faith. All these things must come to pass as YAHSHUA said. Your fear just shows you there are things you need to work on in your walk. The labor pains are increasing and the kingdom of Elohim is almost being delivered. Sometimes you may want to wish you were born in another time period where you did not have to go through what's coming to this world. But let me give you encouragement through the word. We find it in Revelation chapter 20, verses 4 through 6. It says, "And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. Then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to YAHSHUA and for the word of Elohim, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years was finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he who was part in the first resurrection. Over such, the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of Elohim and of Messiah, and shall reign with him 1,000 years." Do you understand that? Many of us will be priests of Elohim and will reign with YAHSHUA for 1,000 years. The word says that we are blessed, and the second death has no power over us. We are blessed. So yes, we have hard times ahead. So did all the apostles and early church. Remember, in order for us to receive the gospel now, they were fed to lions and persecuted heavily. But we are still the blessed ones, because those of us would be in the first resurrection. So do not have fear. I do not know if there's a rapture or not. Being very honest, I really hope that there is one, because I truly do not want to go through what's ahead. But let me tell you that my heart and soul is prepared for it either way, and I want you to be as well. Don't place your bets on not going through tribulation and hard times. Just know that the hard times will be worth it. Place your trust and love in the Father, and always hold your testimony until the end, and you will be saved. Never take the mark and do not follow the ways and patterns of this world. You are blessed to be in this time. You are blessed to still be here to strengthen your faith and your relationship with Him. Don't take it for granted, but walk in it and be strong. You have been chosen, called out, and set apart. Walk in it and be proud. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please do not forget to like it and share it with others. This is an important message, and I want as many as possible to hear it. I will complete it next week. If you have not done so already, do not forget to subscribe to this channel. I upload every Friday. I want to thank all who have supported this ministry. Your contributions really are a big blessing to me and allow me to continue to do this every week. I'm blessed and humbled by your support, and I thank the Father for you all. Okay, thanks again everyone for watching. I love you all.